Hello and welcome back to Speedrun, the fast-talking video game podcast where we talk about pretty much anything weird, retro, or otherwise that interests us. As always, I am Jamie, and joining me, of course, is Jazzie.
I'm back again.
Welcome back again. And, of course, since we usually record these back-to-back, joining us again this week is Neil, RMC. Welcome back to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
Yes, it's been a very long 20 minutes since we last chatted.
I'm glad you explained, because otherwise people would think I only have one shirt.
Thankfully, we're audio only.
Good, okay.
I mean,
or people would be
wow,
is that your favorite hoodie or something? Jeez.
I mean, if we want, we could put this out as a special thing on second YouTube channel, but that's, if folks really want it, or, if the patrons want it. But regardless, today, we're talking about something that, once again, I think that you are, of all the guests we've had, uniquely qualified to talk about, and that is the art of retro game restoration, because I know on your channel you've restored everything from game consoles to computers from all around the world, to even building new machines that are made to replicate the experience of retro computers.
Yeah, mostly on the hardware side, as opposed to the game side. But that's also an interesting aspect that I'm trying to read up on is, as big box games, for example, get more battered and broken, there are ways to repair them that I'm trying to learn. But art is certainly a good word for all of these techniques. Yeah, there really is an art to it. I don't claim to be a grandmaster, but I'm trying to learn.
Hey, true on that. I mean, because, and honestly, like, if y'all listening haven't seen his videos, like, the amount...
What are you doing?
Who even are you?
Oh, who even are
Why are you
yeah,
here?
What? Just the Reggie
Watch his
Fils-A-Mate.
channel.
Is it just the Reggie Fils-A-Mate thing? If you aren't watching his retro gaming videos and his restoration videos, what's wrong with you?
All right,
well,
that's all the
enough
time we have.
Got to get back to playing more Animal Crossing.
Get back to playing.
On mine and Jazzy, you can finish if you'd like. We were on the same train of thought.
Oh no, I was going to say, all right, that's all the time we have. I have to get back to watching RMC on my Nintendo YouTube.
I was going to say the 3DS YouTube app is down. F in the chat, y'all. But
F.
So I wanted to give a brief, I can't speak, a brief overview of basically your process and some of the different techniques, as much as we can in 15 minutes. And if we can't get it all, and then it's an excuse to have you back on the show sometime.
Sure.
Because this has been lovely. But
Truly.
Yeah, so starting the timer, I guess first we gotta talk about is, what would you say is the number one issue you find when you get an old machine in? Is it yellowing? Is it bad capacitors? Or is it something else entirely you have to worry about?
Well, you've just mentioned the two very common ones. I mean, you can split the problem really down into the aesthetics and the electronics. Those are the two categories. Aesthetically, yes, so many of our consoles yellow. We've all got them in our collection that have yellowed. I've got over here probably the worst example that I've got. And it also means it's a brilliant opportunity to do some experimentation, because it's only PlayStation 1, which is not uncommon. So I could do sort of half and half with different techniques to see how they work best. I need to open it so you can really get the full effect. So you can see the original color. Sorry, I know this is an audio podcast, so this is basically gold. It's yellowed so much, it's like a bronzy gold. And then as soon as you open the disc tray on the PlayStation on the top, you can see that original grey colour, and there's a massive difference between the colours. So this was donated. I don't exactly know how it was kept, whether it was kept in a window and subjected to sunlight or very warm conditions, or what caused it. But this is a great opportunity to do something like half peroxide to try and retrobrite it, maybe half just put it in the sun. There's this light bright technique that people use. But that's quite a problem here in the UK sun, because as soon as you want to go out and do some retrobriting, the heavens open and it rains. So it's quite difficult. But yeah, so yellowing is a big problem. And there are a lot of opinions really as to whether you should retrobrite things or whether you should keep the patina and keep it original. I don't know where you sit on the fence, both of you. Are you retrobriters or patina lovers?
So I prefer to retrobrite. The only method I've ever tried is the one that was popularized by the 8-bit guy, where basically you just make a peroxide mixture in a big tub and you cover it with plastic and you put it out. Which the issue is, of course, living in beautiful sunny Vancouver Island, we have the same problem. It's very beautiful, but it's rarely actually that sunny.
Yeah. You can't really go wrong with that technique, because I often use cream peroxide just because it's very cheap to get hold of, and liquid peroxide I have to source it on Amazon. I think it's about £20 a tub. You need a couple of them to do some micros, but you will get much more even coverage with the liquid. It really sort of swirls around and you won't get patchy bits. So it is a good technique. And I probably learned it from the 8-bit guy as well originally, so he's doing great things. How about you, Jazzie? Retrobrite, yay or nay?
I am actually firmly on the retrobrite bandwagon because it brings the console back to its original state, which I feel is nice for restoration. When it comes to other things like guitars and amps, I'm absolutely off the bandwagon on restorations because I like those as like dirty and road worn as possible.
Yeah, I get that. You don't really want your Sony PlayStation to look like it's done a tour of North America, but a guitar, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get that. Definitely. Yeah. But there are certain things that you do want to leave on there. If someone scratched their name into it, if there's an old warranty sticker, things like that, that is part of the patina that you like to try and keep if possible. So there's the aesthetics. And then when it comes to the electronics, yes, as you mentioned, capacitors are a massive thing. Anywhere where there's heat inside the system, the capacitors are likely to have got hot and dried up. There are certain periods where you have what's called the Capacitor Plague, where just really bad quality capacitors were put out there. There are stories out there about capacitor manufacturers in different eras managing to spy and get hold of other manufacturers' recipes for their capacitor juice. But through sort of networks, they got to know that this spying was happening, so they leaked incorrect recipes and things like that. So bad capacitors were created by competing companies. And as a result, we've got all of these systems now which are just leaking all over the place. For example, the Amiga 600 and 1200 and CD32, that sort of era, those have got awful surface mount capacitors. Excuse me. Sorry, just had to clear my throat.
No, you're all good.
Things like the Pioneer Laser Active, this is not regional. This affects everywhere, which I recapped once, or hundreds of capacitors in that thing, and every single one of them is likely to leak if it hasn't already leaked. So capacitors are a huge thing. And when you do the capacitors, you'll often get comments just saying, oh, why do you always do the capacitors, even if they're not leaking? Because there is a mindset with some people that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And you can look at electronics devices that are 60 or 70 years old that are still soldering on old radios and things like that. But I'm more of a fan of preventative maintenance. Get it done before it breaks. So that, and then the other huge thing, the really common thing I come across is batteries. So you have these backup batteries in computers. Usually they're used if you want to save a file and you want to keep the date and time in your computer, so the battery has to keep the date and time while the computer's switched off. And more often than not, those batteries have now leaked. Real bad ones are the Amiga 500 Plus, because they had a battery on board, whereas the original 500 didn't, and every time I get a 500 Plus, they've leaked. And the Acorn Archimedes range of computers, which are wonderful machines. They have the ARM processor that we all have in our phones and our tablets now. Real big part of computing history, the Archimedes machines. Every single one that I've ever had, I've had about 4 come into the cave now, and they've all had batteries that have leaked to the point where it's destroyed the traces, it's destroyed the hard drive controllers, the video chips. It's just green ooze everywhere. So batteries are horrible, horrible things. Yeah. Cut them out. Even if you don't know how to solder, get some snips and cut them out.
And it's funny as well because, talking about the capacitors and, the batteries and such. These are things, that we cannot stress enough. This is not just a regional thing. Like, I know the most infamous one is in North America. If you find a Sega Game Gear, half the time it won't work because the capacitors have leaked. Unless it's one of the later ones, which I forget who did the release of it in like 98 over here. But, if it's an original model, half the time the capacitors have leaked. And if it hasn't, if you pick one up and it's like, oh yeah, but the screen's a little weird or the sound's a little off, they're about
the audio is a very common one on the Game Gear. It's well worth recapping your Game Gears.
So going into that, you mentioned the laser active, which I remember you also did a video on, and that looked, goodness, like as always, the shots are beautiful and stuff, but the actual process looked painful.
Yeah, it's funny. They're all surface mount cap, pretty much all surface mount caps in the laser active, which are actually easier. When you're a beginner, you tend to look at through holes and think, well, I understand, you heat it up, you pull it out the hole, you put a new one in. But actually, you're more likely to pull pads off and cause damage with the through hole capacitors if you're not doing it right. Once you get the hang of the surface mount capacitors, a little bit of flux paste, a little bit of hot air, patience is the main key to everything, whether it's retrobriting or electronics. Make sure you've allowed yourself the time not to rush. Put your headphones on and some relaxing music, and just take your time over it, and those caps will come off quite quickly. You run into problems where there have been leaks because the corrosion of the leak, if it gets onto the pad, sometimes the pad will come off with it, and it's a cat and mouse game. It's a very difficult thing to do when the leaks have started happening. But even if you rip the pad off, if you can't do it, you can usually find someone who can help you in the community, because that whatever your favorite console is or computer is, that's where you've got to go, and you will very, very quickly get an idea from any forum for any computer if you need to check your caps, because once a machine gets a reputation, it's all people talk about on the forums. When you ask a question, that's the first answer you'll get. Have you checked the caps? Are they leaking? So, yeah.
And would it be fair to say as well that if you have a machine that does fall into that category, it's easier to replace them now and prevent it now than to wait for there to be a leak?
Yeah, as I said, there's two schools of thought on this, but my school of thought is preventative maintenance. So, yeah, do it, especially if the machine has a reputation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So going on to a different slant, because we aren't just talking about restoration itself, but the art of it. When you're filming, you use a variety of angles for that, I notice, and the filmmaker in me finds this incredibly pleasing to look at. What are your tips for being able to film while, say, soldering, or while using an odd link screwdriver to get something out, or making sure you can both get the shot and have the shot look good, but also still get the work done in a comfortable manner?
Well, I can tell you this. If you're trying to film yourself doing any of these repairs, it will take 30, 40 times longer than if you weren't filming yourself. There's no quick way of doing this, which is why patience is key. And because I'm now YouTubing full time, I do have the beauty of time on my side. I'm always running out of time for some reason, but I do have a lot more time on my hands to take the time to get the shot. When it comes to cinematography, and all the equipment, I didn't have the first idea when I started YouTubing. I just happened to have a camera. It was a Sony NEX5 from 2012. I must have bought it around about then. I noticed that it did 1080p video, but it didn't have, I couldn't do manual focus. I couldn't change the frame rate. I just couldn't do anything with it. I could just point and shoot, basically. And that is what I built the channel on. Up until about 2 years ago, I was using that camera. And then I switched. More recently, I bought a Lumix GH5, and it was a huge shock to me, because suddenly I had to understand how to manually operate a camera, whether it's the ISO or calibrating the color or manually focusing everything, because the autofocus on the Lumix is famously awful if you try and leave it on autofocus. So suddenly I had to learn a huge amount. And it's taken some adjusting. There's a period when I first got that camera where there's not so many angles in my videos because I'm just desperately trying to use the camera. Whereas the old one, the beauty of it was I was so limited in what I could do with it. I just had to creatively work around its limitations. But I think I've got the hang of it now. So there should be a lot more angles back again, which will hopefully please you. And it's all in 4K now, which is nice. So, yeah, so the approach to all of my, you call it cinematography, I call it amateur filmmaking, is just, I'm just figuring it out. And I usually put some music on to get me in the right mindset, which is great because I've got the whole cave lined with speakers now here. So put the tunes on and feel the micros, feel the 8-bit micro, let it flow through you and just shoot what feels right. Yeah. I guess that's how it works.
And actually going from that, like I'm looking at the actual cave setup here, and it is gorgeous how you have it set up. Absolutely gorgeous. But the cave is less of a cave now. It's actually in a proper location that if I remember right, you're making kind of that almost like a lounge-like area within such now.
Yes, I'm incredibly lucky. Well, unlucky at first because the original cave, the landlord put in planning permission to change it into houses, so I had to quickly find a new place. And I was approached by the owners of this building. It's a 17th century mill. I'm on the top floor of it. I've got a mill pond outside. There's ducks, there's heron, there's otters. It's an amazing part of the world. And I've got this huge space up here. It's so huge, I've got a curtain hung in front of me to try and dampen the echo, because if I don't have that up, it sounds like I'm in a church or a cathedral here. And what I'm doing is I'm turning it into a museum so that people can come and visit. So all of the machines I've restored are all laid out on workbenches. We've got the music, we've got nice lighting. I've got an area full of tabletop gaming devices, Game & Watch devices, a library full of magazines and things like that. So we're going to have open days, a few days a month. Probably, I'm aiming from September to hopefully do that. COVID permitting, we'll have to see what the restrictions are like at the time. So the whole creation of this space is almost like a restoration in itself, because it was just a big empty room. And the audience seemed to really like it as much as they like seeing me restore a machine. They like seeing me transform this space into hopefully a bit of a retro destination and somewhere they might want to make a pilgrimage to. I'm really enjoying it. And just like my filmmaking, my interior design is completely made up. I just go with what I think feels right. But the building lends itself to that so well because it's semi-industrial, obviously being an old mill. The contrast between the old industrial beams and the 80s and the 90s technology and the rough walls. All you've got to do is throw a bit of RGB lighting at one of these walls and it looks spectacular. You can see behind me. So it's a great space. Yeah. And you both have to come and visit if you're ever in the UK.
Absolutely.
You know, I was just thinking about a field trip.
You know, me too. And actually, I was thinking about it as well, because this, like, it's such, like, really, it's beautiful work y'all have been doing there on it. And we just hit time, but I have to ask, any inspiration from the makerspace movement?
Yeah, I have spoken. There is a local makerspace in Swindon who I've been to see. Oh, I did before COVID. And I'm hoping that we can get something like that together here. Obviously, it would be great to find a sponsor to source equipment for soldering irons and things like that, so that we can have people come here. And then, yeah, I'd love to have makerspace days here. There must be lots of people in the town locally. Stroud, if anyone from Stroud is listening and you want to start a makerspace, get in touch, because I've got the space. We just need to get the equipment together and we can do that.
Mm-hmm. Just got to drop that email for them.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Yeah.
or on the topic.
Twitter at RMC Retro. Yeah.
Yeah.
or just just come down the road and look for the big mill. I'm in there.
Jazz,
We are at time, but I did have. Oh, I'm sorry. I did have a perfect segue question that I've been holding on to since the start. Any soldering iron recommendations, and also, what is your favorite tip to use on projects?
I have a Weller iron. I can't remember the model of it, but I do really like the Weller brand. Just because I started off with the cheaper one, and that was great. But when you get when you spend a little bit more on there, you don't ever have that period where it feels like you've run out of heat. It's always checking the temperature and keeping the temperature right. It's got, it's done proper, and it makes a huge difference. And I like a chisel tip personally.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, you like that?
Yeah, you're a man of culture, I see.
Depends what you're doing. If you're doing drag soldering or whatever, but generally I'll use a chisel tip. Yeah.
Very, very nice.
And then as for the number one tip you haven't given so far for anyone working on any retro project, to end off, what would that be? The number one tip for it?
Oh, chisel tip.
You can use it for literally everything. It's so good.
I don't think you understand. I don't think y'all listening understand. The tip is chiseled.
It's true. It's like a little, like a, the big, the Magnum Sharpie, and it's a chisel tip, and you can do really fine points or really fat boy lines. It's so important. It's so good. It matters.
Number one tip, get yourself a chisel tip. Number two tip is look out for local computer groups, because there are more and more cropping up. The nearest one to me is there's an Amiga. Oh God, the name of them has completely escaped me now. What are they called? Southwest Amiga Group, SWAG. I found them a year or so ago, and they're just a great group of guys. And I'm seeing more and more of these groups crop up. People nostalgic for their old micros, getting groups together in local halls, and go and support them and get involved. And you will find people there who can answer every question you've got. You'll find people there who will recap your machines for you. It's just fantastic. So find a local group and get involved.
Excellent. And before I have us, Jazz, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm interrupting you a lot today. And I promise.
Oh, no, not at all. I was just saying, cool.
And Neil, before I have you plug where everyone can find you, for those listening from Victoria, because I know a lot of local folks do listen, we have a wonderful group locally here called Vic64, which they claim to be a Commodore group, but really I found that if you have questions about pretty much anything ranging from DOS PCs and back, you'll be able to find some help. I discovered them when I got sent a 1084S monitor from Germany, and the headphone jack didn't work on it. So, which it actually wasn't even a capacitor issue. It ends up there just been and shipping a small crack on the board right by it.
Sure. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, similar experience at the Amiga group. People will turn up with Atari Jaguars and all sorts. There are like-minded people there, and that's all that matters.
Yes. So on that note, because community is everything, and speaking of community, where can people find your community online?
Search for RMC Retro on YouTube, on all of the social media channels, on Patreon. Any video that I've put out there, look for my Discord link, because we've got a very active Discord server, lots of people chatting about lots of machines, and we'd love to see you there.
Excellent. And of course, Speedrun is made possible in part by a few different things. We have Podbean itself, if you'd like to start a podcast of your own, get some nice hosting. Then go to podbean.com/speedrun, or use the code SPEEDRUN when you go to get your nice paid hosting. We'd highly recommend it. And also, I got to mention Ubisoft Canada again. We are giving out a copy of Immortals Phoenix Rising via Twitter. Go ahead and enter. It might be over by whenever this is going out. Well, who knows? We're moving things around. And after recording this, we're going to be giving away some codes on the show itself. It's really good. And even if the Twitter giveaway is passed, thank you again to Ubisoft Canada for making this all possible. Speedrun is also part of Stuff We Play, and if you would like to support what we do, and I forgot to mention last episode, and get podcast episodes 1 week early, patreon.com/stuffweplay. The Stuff We Playtron. And finally, Jazzy, you were part of Cleveland Audio Mixology. I got it right this time.
There you go.
Plug what you do.
I edit podcasts. I edit bands. I make you sound bad. Or I make you take you from...
but like in the 80 cents.
Yeah.
It's like,
no.
Yeah, like kind of.
I
Michael
take your
Jackson
bad recordings and make you sound good.
Make you sound like Michael Jackson.
As in it's good. Yeah, it makes you sound like Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
It's a real thriller of an experience.
Oh, shut the hell up. That's my favorite Jackson album, actually. Yes, I will make you sound like Michael Jackson. Fun fact, this is the Shure SN7B, which is the mic used to record Thriller and Bad. Fun facts for you. And you can get more audio fun facts by emailing clevelandaudiomixology.com. Anywho, also, Neil, we need your Patreon again.
Yes.
Patreon.com/RMC Retro.
There it is.
The big drive at the moment on the Patreon is if we can get enough patrons, we're going to open a secret arcade in the space behind me. So that's the target, to open an arcade.
Okay.
Wow.
I'm here for that. I'm on board for that. I will.
Last but not least, thank you to Castlemania Games for giving me GameCube toys. I love you.
I was gonna say, I was like, am I allowed to say this on Podbean? I'm like, Jazzy, you edit, you use your description. I was like, become a proud simp, make the arcade happen.
You are allowed to say that. Yeah. And also, we stand simps because simps respect creators.
Simps respect creators. So on that note, I have been Jamie.
I've been Jazzy.
I've been Neil.
And this has been Speedrun. Thank you very much for listening. Stay classy, and we'll see you next time.
Cheerio.
And see ya. Oh, that was good.
That was good.
Cheerio.
I love that. I love that.
That's beautiful.
Jazzy, is that a guarantee? Will you make me sound like Michael Jackson?
I will make you sound bad.
Who's bad?
That was scarily good.
Thank you.
It must be the mic.
Yeah, it is the mic. I'm going to leave all that in.